Yeah, and he turned out fine. He went to Harvard.
Ready when you are.
We are ready? Okay. I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the Zoning Design and Review Board. The date is February 10th, the year 2009. May we have the roll call?
Chair Holliday.
Here.
Member James.
Here.
Member Dornbecker. Here. Member Lamborn.
Here.
Member Stitt.
May I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The agenda is adopted. The minutes. May I have a motion for approval or correction?
One correction, small. Item 8.1 indicates the motion was approved 5-0. There were only 4 voting members.
Okay, and I have some comments on the minutes. Is there anybody else? Minutes? Minutes? No. I like the format. Who's the author of the minutes?
I do the minutes.
Could you sign them so we know? They're very nice. And I also wondered, is there a reason why they're not on both sides of the page?
No, we can adopt that practice.
Is that as easy?
It is.
If we're going to save trees, we might as well start here. And is there a reason we didn't have the December?
Those haven't been completed yet.
Is there a reason for that?
Probably staff time
Okay.
and ability to finish them.
Yeah, it's, of course, more convenient if they're timely. So may I have a motion to accept the minutes as written, corrected? Sorry.
I move that the minutes be approved as, with the one correction.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Public comment. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to address an item that is not on the agenda? No, seeing none, we'll go on to the consent calendar. There are no items. There's no items for presentation and discussion. We will start the public hearing with the Jenny House at 6859 Jefferson Street.
Madam Chair, due to the proximity of my residence, I'm recusing myself.
Okay.
Good evening. This is a design review to demolish the existing single-family residence and construct a new residence, an attached 4-car vintage auto barn, and a 2-car garage with associated site circulation, landscaping, and accessory improvements. The drawings are posted behind me on the bulletin board. This is an approximately 11,000 square foot parcel that's located in the Old Town Historic District. It is currently developed with a single-family residence and associated structures, and it is within a neighborhood that is predominantly single-family residential. This is a project that has some history. It was originally presented to the Town Council on September 2nd, and that proposal was to retain a portion of the existing residence and to add additions and construct a duplex. It proposed a floor area ratio of approximately 38% that was within the 40% allowed for duplexes within the historic district. At the town council meeting, there was concern that that duplex was inconsistent in terms of use and scale with the buildings in the Old Town neighborhood, and the applicant noted the public input and the town council comment and significantly revised the project, and that's the one before you tonight. It consists of a complete demolition of the existing residence and construction of a new one. Page 2 of the staff report includes a table that indicates the house area, the FAR exemptions, the setbacks, and the heights. And what you'll notice is that this is within the FAR is below 25%, which is the reduced FAR that's allowed for single-family residences. It consists of a 2-story, 1,799 square foot residence that has a large front porch that wraps around the northeast corner. It features a second-story balcony, and to the west side is proposed a one-story, 923-square-foot vintage auto barn. Adjacent to the residence to the north is an outdoor kitchen pavilion with a pitched roof arbor and a chimney, and there's a further detail in your packet on its appearance. At the rear of the property in the northwest corner, the applicant proposes a two-car detached garage and the existing 142-square-foot storage shed at the southwest corner is slated for retention. The design of the new residence would exhibit lap siding and beadboard, features cornice molding and multi-paned windows, with the garage having carriage-style doors. The applicant proposes painting the entire structure white, and it would feature a green roof, and that's different than the illustrations in your packet, which are for the purpose of detail. Driveways are proposed to access the different garages, and the paving surface for the first portion of the property is TerraPave, and that's a natural crushed granite material that's bound with pine resin. That transitions to flagstone, and there's also use of permeable turf blocks. The landscape plan includes retention of many of the existing plants and introduction of others as well. The concept for the front garden is for a drought-tolerant landscape, and there's a rock swale proposed in the rear yard for water retention. The fencing that would surround the property would consist of a 2-foot wrought iron fence at the front and for the first 20 feet back on the property, transitioning to a painted 6-foot tall wood fence, and the applicant is proposing a 2-foot lattice on top of that. Staff's review of this project is that it fully complies with the height and setback requirements and the floor area ratio when the different exemptions are taken into account, and the exemptions that apply to this property are the 399 square foot detached garage, the 282 square foot front porch, the second floor terrace, the kitchen pavilion, and 100 square feet of the existing storage shed. Staff also found that the project was consistent with the design review guidelines and standards in terms that it features a dominant front porch, that it has various roof lines and steep pitches and the gabled roof form, that the exterior colors are muted and soft, that multi-pane windows are proposed, and that the garage is set back so that it's less visible and dominant from the street. The applicant's also proposing the permeable paving surfaces of the flagstone and turf, which are encouraged, and while TerraPave is impermeable, it's considered an environmentally friendly product. The only non-conforming aspect of the project is the height proposed for the fence, and that's the 2-foot lattice over the 6-foot height limit. And staff has advised the applicant that in order to build to that height, they need the written approval and consent of neighbors. And we haven't received that yet, but if they're able to obtain that height fence would be acceptable. We're proposing standard conditions that are listed in Attachment A. We are recommending approval, and the applicant is here as well to represent its project.
Thank you. Good report. Do we have questions? No. Questions?
Of staff? Is there anything in the zoning ordinance that stipulates you can only have one garage?
There isn't, no.
So you can have 2 or 3 potential, okay. Thank you.
Would the applicant like to make a statement?
My name is Jay Jacobson. I'm the architect speaking for the applicant. The first thing I always like to say to review boards and town councils is that you guys put in a lot of labor that ends up guaranteeing the value of all of our property, and you do it for not a lot of remuneration. So the first thing I always like to say is thanks. Secondly, I hope that the first impression you get when you see this home is exactly the impression that we're trying to get across, that this is a life dream for the Jennies to live at this property in this house. And the reason is that the Old Town, more than an architectural concept or a series of zoning guidelines, is a neighborhood. And what the architecture says is it says we're all part of a neighborhood. And if I've done my job, it's to validate that the Jennies want to put their money where their heart is and be part of the neighborhood. And in all sincerity, that's what I hope this house tells you. Beyond that, I got the wheel of the samples here, and you're welcome to pass that around. It's most of these materials are, I hesitate to say generic, but they're pretty readily available and pretty common in the marketplace. I'm sure the Jennies and myself are open to any questions that you have.
Do we have questions?
Mr. Jacobson, do you mind if I ask you a question about the fence, since it will not look like the fence in the photo?
Good, go ahead.
So in the front of the house, it will be the wrought iron, is that correct?
That is great question. You found the one. In the drawing right now, what you're seeing, or in the composite rendering, you're seeing the actual picket that's on the house right now. What that picket does is very clearly outline where the front of the property is, and it outlines the maximum height that wrought iron would be. When we get done doing it, it'll be quite a bit more transparent, and the intention of Erin is to train the vines that are growing there right now onto that wrought iron fence, and that's what we'll end up with. But yes, I'm glad you pointed that out. It will not be a white picket fence in front of the house.
Then the fence around the remainder of the property is the fence that you're talking about, having a painted fence with the extender.
Right, right. As proposed, what I believe we discussed was that the Jennies intend to discuss that each and individually with each of their surrounding neighbors. And
We will not do anything without the consensus of each neighbor.
Okay.
yeah, the fence for the most part right now is, well, it's not going to fall over on anybody, but there won't be any tragedy if it sits there for another year or so. It's not going to change the property in any way.
Okay, thank you.
Let me just, do you need these to? I'll leave them up here. They're fun.
Oh, I had one question before you.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
How do you see the flagstone? How is that going to be set? I'm thinking the flagstone that's in the kind of
The
corner.
paving area or the outdoor kitchen, are you thinking? There's two stone constructions. There's an outdoor kitchen that's in the landscape pavilion.
It's just this large flagstone area here. How do you plan on having those set? Are you set in concrete or in stone?
What I would like to do, if you don't mind, is have our landscape designer speak to any of your issues on the landscaping and the outdoor hardscape design.
Good evening. I'm Marcy Nielsen Barrezo, and I'm the design consultant who worked with the Jennies on the landscape and with Jay Jacobson. In answer to your question, there's flagstone depicted here, but I've since spoken with the Jennies about some alternatives, including permeable pavers that would allow a firm surface for driving on, but it allows space between the pavers so that water can trickle through and move through the substrata and be purified before it enters the water table. I'm kind of a green bean, and I like that idea. And Mr. Jenny sounded like he thought it was a good idea, too. We both feel that it would be of benefit aesthetically as well to use a similar surface throughout. So that's what we'll be exploring. It's quite a bit of time between now and the time that that will be installed. But that's a point of interest and a point of emphasis. I realize that in the historic district, there isn't a storm drainage system at this point, so it would be irresponsible to not make plan for where the water goes. So that's why there's the rain cashment swale, and that's why we're considering the permeable pavers. Is that helpful? Is that answering the question?
Okay. There was mention in the staff report that that was going to be a permeable surface as flagstone, and so quite often you see flagstone set in concrete. And
right. And then where does it go?
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So we're going to try to anticipate that. And it might be that we'll use pavers rather than flagstone. Flagstone is beautiful. It has a more natural feel, but it's more likely to shift. So that's a question that's still, open to research. But our intention is to retain water on the property as much as possible and to make the plant materials as water conservative as possible. Do you have any other questions that I might address for you?
Where is the 6-foot fence?
Oh, the 6-foot fence, again, in keeping with code, there are low fences in the front of the property. The 6-foot fences are corresponding to the fences that currently exist on the perimeter of the property on the north and the west and the south side. Thanks, Jay. And the suggestion of the 2-foot extension is just a way of creating privacy for all of the neighbors if that's what they choose. It's nothing that anyone's particularly attached to. It's just a thought. So if it didn't happen, no one's heart will be broken. It's just an option.
But you've received neither approval nor disapproval from the neighbors, is that correct?
I don't know that there's been a response at this point, but I don't think the Jennies have had an opportunity to discuss it with the neighbors yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
So again, it's just like well, what do you think? Does that sound like a good thing to you? So,
All right.
all right. Is there anything else I can help you with?
How high is the arched gate, the entry gate to the?
That would be for you, Jay, because I didn't sketch that one in.
Good question. It's it wouldn't be 6 feet tall. I don't know, to be honest with you. It's a picture right now.
Okay.
The gate may be it may not even look like.
It probably depends on the placement, how far down the driveway it is, because if it's toward the front, it cannot be 6 feet tall. It has to meet code, so it has to be 36 and under. So if it's further back and contiguous with a 6-foot fence, then it's just sort of like your utility gate on the other side of the house. Sure. So it kind of depends on where it is and how it fits into the scheme of things. But it wouldn't interfere with view, which is the important factor.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Good.
Certainly. Thank you.
Is there anybody in the audience that would like to address this matter? None? Yes?
Hello, Denise Frazier, 6870A Jefferson Street. And I just want to comment that I think the renderings look like it's always been there. I think it's a great addition to the neighborhood.
Thank you very much.
Hello, good evening. I'm Karen Altamira, and I reside at 6871 Jefferson, the home that is south of the Jenny Project. So I just wanted to thank the Jennies for withdrawing their previous application of their duplex and the additional buildings. Very much appreciate that. I was one of the neighbors that originally spoke out against their project for a duplex. So I'm going to probably need some guidelines tonight from you. Basically, I still have concerns. I think that you've done a great job with the design. I was really happy when I got my packet and looked at it. So to start off, thank you for that. I do still remain concerned with the proposed vintage car barn. I appreciate the car barn as it is, so I want to let you know that as a car collector also, and a desire to put your cars there, I can appreciate that. I would like some assurances that this will remain a car barn, that it will not be turned into an additional residence, that it will not be turned into a duplex at some point down the road. So with that being said, you have my blessings on the project. So let's see. Okay, so with that being said, let's see, where am I at? Having concerns with the demolition of the project, being that I am directly next door and have just repainted and done a lot of new construction on the house myself. What sort of assurances I will have with dust and debris control, what you normally recommend when this is happening, whether water or other material is used to control debris and dust and any hazardous, things that might be contained in the house. I would be hoping for some sort of notification, or if there's anything that you do to protect a home directly next door. I have old windows, there's, old plaster, and I know with, earth-moving machines and digging new foundations, that I would just have concerns with that. So I don't know how you've addressed that in the past. I would hope that I could get some reassurances that, I would... not have problems with my home later. In regards to the car barn, would there be some assurances or something in writing that the garage would not be used for anything but storing the vehicles, meaning that there wouldn't be sales of cars out of there, restoring, repairing cars? The car barn is directly next to my property line on my side, and I would just like reassurances again that it is for storage only. You talked about materials being used in the backyard that are for the water being able to permeate the ground, because we would be looking at possibly 6 cars being parked back there, and vintage cars. Having vintage cars myself, I know of oil leakage and various other materials that are the nature of the beast. So how will that be addressed? Let's see here. Obviously, I think that just a matter of normal drainage that's going to come off of the house, how that's going to be addressed so that will not affect myself and my neighbors. So I'm hoping that all that can be addressed also. The fencing between my property and their property, the 6-foot fence with the 2-foot lattice, absolutely. They have my complete blessings on that. It would be a great improvement to what we have. If they could go 5 feet, I don't even care. It would be a nice way to protect my privacy. And I want to say that from what I can tell with the design, a concern of mine at the last meeting when we were talking about their first project was how all the windows and that were going to impact my very small backyard. And I believe that I'm very happy with how that was addressed. So thank you very much for that. So with that being said, I am understanding that they want to do the 2-foot iron fence from where I guess where it steps down. So I would like to see at least the height of what the existing fence is between my property and their property. I don't know how they can incorporate that and then step down to a lower level in the front. But being that it's a barrier between 2 yards, I don't know, about 24 inches, if that's quite adequate. So I think that could probably be addressed fairly simply. Let's see. Oh, also I'm a little confused, and maybe the landscaper can address on what type of vegetation or planting will be on that south side. I think it does not make a difference to me, the rest of the vegetation in their yard. I just would be concerned on what is happening between my backyard and their backyard. It probably will be a pretty narrow area between where the back of their two-story and then the one-story vintage car is. So I would just like to be aware of what sort of plantings, and all that good stuff. Let's see. This is just a little side note. I don't know how the town right now is addressing assurances on a project being completed. With this sort of magnitude that a house is being totally demolished, what assurances the town has that the project will be completed, that a home will be rebuilt like we are seeing now, that it will not be demolished and then will remain an empty lot. I just want to cite the fact that Gordon's, although it is a business, has now sat empty for now a number of years, and it appears that windows are not in it, and it's in a state of real disrepair. And so I am not believing that this is going to be like this. I do believe that the Jennys do want to come here and live and be real proud of something, but what assurances do we have that the house isn't going to be demolished in an empty lot like we have had on the corner of Monroe and Jefferson now? So those are my comments at this point. And again, I think that they've come up with a good plan. And again, if I can be reassured in regards to the vintage car barn that it will not be turned into a residence, they do have my blessings on the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this? Anyone else? No? I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. What do we think? Sandra, what about her concerns on those issues? Can you address
I can
those?
address some of her concerns. With regard to the car barn staying as a vehicle parking and not being turned into a residence, if they were to propose a duplex, that requires a use permit, and they'd have to come back before the town for approval. If they wanted to convert it into living space that's part of their dwelling, they would need a building permit, and that would come before the town too, on a different review basis. With regards to vehicle repair and sale of vehicles, that's likely not allowed within that district, and if there was a potential, it would need a home occupation permit. When it rises to a certain level, it's not a minor permit that's approved by staff, and it would go before town council. With regards to the rock swale and drainage issues, we've included a condition that a drainage plan be submitted and that it be reviewed by the town engineer so that it meets town practices. The iron fence, I believe, is proposed at 2 feet in height, and the code, I believe I would need to check, allows a fence up to 3 feet in height in the front yard, so there's the potential to raise that by 1 foot. With regards to the assurances that the project are completed, the design review is good for 5 years. Within that time, they could pull a demolition permit for the project through the building department. That would be separate from the building permit for the structure itself, so it's possible that it's demolished and they don't continue on. Once they do pull the building permit for the residents, they have to maintain that work, and if there's a lapse within 6 months, they would be red tagged for that. With her concerns with the demolition and the dust and debris issues and wanting notification on earth moving machines, those are not typically items that we regulate, but we could include a condition to that effect. Or the Jennys could agree to personally give that notification. And I think that was everything.
Thank you.
demolition in the Bay Area, you have to get a permit from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and they monitor a demolition like that. So you can't release hazardous dust, or you have to have procedures you do when you demolish that, and it's regulated. So to the extent that it's commonly done, we have to do the same thing everybody else does.
Will the neighbors be informed when those actions take place so they can protect their property if they want to?
We're not required to do that.
Okay.
And it is a practical matter. There would be no way a contractor could tell someone that they don't have any business relationship with what they're about to do on the next day.
I see.
Yeah, I mean, it
So the-
would be in a perfect world, I suppose, you'd let everybody know what you're doing, but as a practical matter, you can't.
I see. So we're talking about just establishing neighborliness. And I don't think we can do that from this
Well,
board.
Again, the persons who we're going to entertain to build a home like this are not going to run roughshod on the neighborhood. There's a lot of other. Oh, very sorry. Thank you. The contractor is going to do this kind of a project is not going to run roughshod over the. There's noise regulations in the neighborhood. There's a number of different procedures. You have to watch for people's cars. There's a lot of things you have to be careful about when you do construction. And while I can't say, it's common in construction to create dust. It's common to create noise. It's also common that the builders know that and that they have to deal with it. And if the reason you don't have ordinance in front of you governing those things except for noise and the dust and so forth is that in some, I appreciate the fact that if in a condition in which you had pile drivers or something of that nature and there is a potential for damage to someone's property, then there's a common sense duty to inform and to take precautions so that doesn't happen, because you are subject to consequence for that. But no, there's no way to tell anybody what the phasing of construction is or when things are going to happen, and unfortunately in the economy and the things, there's no way to tell really how the progress of this. We'd like to do it as soon as possible, but you know.
But it is possible for you to know when those machines come in and perhaps just notify the neighbors.
Well, I get it. We can do the best we can. I think that would be the best answer I could give.
I think that's what she's looking for.
Yeah,
She's
okay.
looking for
All
a
right,
good
well,
neighbor.
May I speak?
Sure.
Would you introduce yourself?
I'm Irene Jenny, and I reside at 6859 Jefferson, hopefully full-time, as soon as this is built. We came to this town about 5 years ago as a second home, and we fell in love with the town. We fell in love with the people. We fell in love with our little neighborhood, and I've convinced my husband that we needed to buy something a little bit larger so it could become a home. What we had was a tiny cottage. We saw this property. Unfortunately, we bought it at a time when it was rather expensive. We bought it for the size, and we entertained building a home that was large enough to do what we wanted to do. We spent a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of energy on that. We came in here in September, and halfway through the meeting, I realized we weren't going to go through with it. I don't want to live in an area where people are not happy to see my car drive up. I do not want to live in a place where somebody says, oh, there she goes. So we walked out of here, and the council did not say it was over. They said, come back with revised plans, et cetera, et cetera. We walked over here, and actually I ran after one of the neighbors who is here today, who had actually walked over and says, we'd love the Jennys, but we don't want a duplex. And I looked at her and I said, we're going to work on something. Before the night was over, it was very clear that we weren't going to do a duplex. We came up with this idea. The house, now you may laugh at me, is only 1,799 square feet. But really, the FAR allowed for that building, for this lot, 25%, is a home of 3,600 square feet. I, because of my love of my husband, am giving up a bigger home, a bigger room, so that he could have this building next to it. It's going to look very much like the house, but it's going to be one story, and so for him to put his vintage cars and boat in there. He definitely is not in the market to sell any of them. I think he would rather sell me first. He has no need to work on cars. We have no intention of making it look like a garage. It is going it's a part of our life. It's a part of our living. It's a part of our home. But it is not going to have people in it. I always tease him. I'm more a people person and he's more a car thing person. So but we get along. Anyway, we are going to do the best we can to make sure that we build something very much in keeping with the neighborhood. I've always loved the house on the corner of Monroe and Jefferson, the big white house.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I can't have anything that large, but this is going to look very much like that, white. I just don't want the shutters. And we are definitely going to be a very good part of this neighborhood. I will, although legally I don't have to, but I will gladly let anybody know anything that is happening there. I can do an email blast. I think I can do that. It's not a problem. I can't say every second I can tell them what's happening, but homes are being built in Yountville right now. Of all places, Yountville is just full of things happening right now. And this will be a home. We're going to try, hopefully, to do it as quickly as we can because we would love to live here. It isn't to please anybody else. I would like to. We're maintaining 2 homes right now, this one and another one, and it's actually very expensive. So the sooner this is done, the happier I will be, and hopefully Ted. I don't like the empty lot on the corner of Monroe and Jefferson. I've lived with it for a long time because our little cottage was on Monroe. So I will gladly, begin. But who knows what's going to happen in life? I can't guarantee that a year from now you're going to see a house there. I can't guarantee I will be here a year from now. I actually have chronic cancer, and I may not be around. I'd like this done as soon as possible. I want to live there. I've cut pictures of flowers and et cetera, et cetera. As far as the fences around the neighborhood, I'd like it to be as private as we can. We'll work with them. Every house that we abut, we will absolutely work with those neighbors. We will work with them with what trees we're putting up. I don't want to be a bad neighbor. I will do my best to be an asset to Yountville and definitely an asset to Jefferson Street. Thank you.
Thank you. Shirley.
So thank you, Irene, for saying that. I appreciate that. So I took a lot of care with my house of 1897 to repair and restore the windows, which means there's no weather stripping and a lot of dust can get through. So I am glad for the record that she will notify me when the demolition starts so that I will have enough time to put plastic and tape up my windows during that time so that I can protect at least the windows and the interior of the house. I'm still not hearing that I will have any assurances that it will not be turned into a duplex. It sounds like that the vintage car barn will be built and that at any time they could come back and propose that to the town and that we would have to face that at that time. And I hope that, as she said, no one ever knows what's going to happen in the future, that they could build it, move, sell it. Any of us have that choice to do that. So I guess that's a bridge that we'll have to cross at that time. Also, you did not address what sort of vegetation was going to be planted or proposed to be planted in between the that south side of their house and the fence.
I would let the landscape architect
Okay,
respond to that.
okay, that's great, perfect. And then maybe they could also address then different materials for the ground, being that there is a potential of 6 vehicles being parked. And that, thank you.
While we're on the subject of the landscaping, I'd also like some clarification about what's going on along the northern edge. It's just kind of the general side yard plantings and screening that you had in mind. I see
Okay.
that there's some existing things you're going to keep, and then there's some little shrubs in there that aren't called out. So I'm just wondering what those are.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
The intention is that we will retain as much of the existing vegetation as is reasonable. Part of what had appeal to the Jennies is the woodland kind of quality that is part of the existing landscape, and that'll be impacted somewhat. And some of the plants are old and a little scraggly and haven't had an opportunity to benefit from much light. So some of that will be cleared, but most of the intention is to retain the existing plants. So when you're looking, Ms. Altamira, do you have a copy of the landscape plan? Would you like to look at one?
Well, I have what was given out on your
Yeah, that's it. You got it. Okay. So what you see drawn in there on the south side of the property that abuts Ms. Altamira's property, those are the existing plants. There are some witch hazel trees. There's a little fig. If that fig ever took off, it would be way too big for the spot, so we'll see if we can perhaps move that. It's a very narrow, more of a utility side yard. So I can't speak for the Jennies without speaking to the Jennies, right? That would be inappropriate. But I see no problem with having a conversation about what we could even train up the fence so that it would be of mutual appeal. Along the fence that would be abutting both properties. It's a very narrow side yard. It's basically a utility yard. The property, the building has been designed so that there aren't even windows overlooking there, so it's very private as far as the building is concerned. So whatever was trained up the fence, a vine, a flowering vine or something like that, it could be chosen to be something that would be of appeal to you as well as for the Jennies.
So those aren't trees there?
Those are existing. Those trees that
I'm
are
going to
already there
interrupt you at
are
this
existing
point.
trees.
Pardon me, I'm going to interrupt you.
Yeah.
The purpose of this meeting is to satisfy the
detail.
public and not
To make plant plans?
not to negotiate
Thank you.
geraniums.
Perfect.
So,
Okay. Then let me address Mr. Lambourne's question then. On the north side, you're wondering what's going on there? Part of that area is, this is essentially going to be the Jenny's outdoor living space. So if the neighbor on the north is comfortable with the idea of extending the fence, that protects their privacy. And then there would be plant material in front of that fence to create a greater sound buffer and to soften the edges. There are small plants that are indicated there, and then a little bit of a, the elevation is built up around the photinia, that large plant that you see indicated. That's about a 3-foot elevation. So it creates an opportunity to have a recirculating pump that could be run by a solar cell so that it wouldn't use electricity. And that would give a little bit of a water element there near the entertainment area. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question. Is this adequate?
Well, where I'm headed with this, and
Yeah,
this is
okay.
one of my concerns, is the neighbor's privacy to the north is predicated on accepting a 6-foot fence with a plus or minus 2-foot extension on top of it. If they're not in favor of that, then we would rely on landscaping.
Absolutely.
I don't have enough information, both on the northern edge and the southern edge, to say this looks sufficient
Okay.
with or without a 2-foot extension.
The plants that are suggested there, one of the plants that I had in mind was Italian buckthorn, which is a common hedge material, and it grows tall and narrow and is easily prunable. So it would essentially be a living fence. So that's another option. If the neighbor isn't comfortable with the 2-foot extension, it really doesn't matter. It's an aesthetic decision. If it's something that they would find appealing, great. And if not, not a problem. We can certainly, there's plenty of space there to add plant material to create a softening and a buffer. It's all very, very flexible, very open. Is there anything else, Mr. Lamborn?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else from town? No? I'm going to close the public meeting, and we're going to discuss this. It seems to me what we're facing here is the goodwill of the neighbors, and I'm not sure that that's our purview. I don't think we can do it for today. We can't do it for tomorrow. We don't know who's going to be there when. It's up to the people in town to get along with their neighbors, not this board. And so we will address the issues of design and zoning and not personal interaction. What do we think about design and zoning?
Well, in my opinion, my humble opinion, our main calling here is, I'm just going to quote from the ordinance, that design review shall be required to ensure that new and renovated structures reinforce the character and scale of Old Town. I think the design as submitted largely does that and does it very successfully, and I wanted to thank Mr. Jacobson, the project architect, for very understandable and well-prepared drawings. It makes our job a lot easier. I don't feel like I have enough information to say yay or nay on the landscape plan. Again, is it a 6-foot high fence with a 2-foot extension, or is it going to be vegetation that creates that fence, or is it both? And there's just not enough information there to do either. And I do, and this is just more a comment than anything else, as drawn or as presented, this large entry gate, which if I scale it off the 2-foot wrought iron, or it looks like it could be 6 or 7 or a little bit more. I would rethink that as well. Those are my main comments. I think maybe there's a couple conditions that we can add, conditions of approval to the project that I'd like to see. And we can talk about those in summary.
Sure, good, thanks. Marita?
Well, I think based on the design, and I have no problem. I think it'll be a lovely development in the Old Town area, and I'm looking forward to seeing the Jennies around town.
So what I'm hearing is that we like the concept of the house. We like the house and the design, but we would like a more elaborate landscape plan and a more definitive view of the fences and the gates.
Yeah, I think that's, and that doesn't need to hold up the overall permitting process, but maybe prior to issuing an occupancy permit or something, we cover those grounds. That's fine. I'd be okay with that.
I would too. I think that
We have a motion?
I'd like to talk about the fencing first. Is it appropriate to make that a condition of approval that the applicant provide written documentation from the surrounding neighbors that they're okay with the fence as designed?
Yes.
So that's going to also involve at least a quick 1-page, 8.5 by 11 detail of the fence, so the neighbors know what they're agreeing to. So I'd like that worked into the condition if possible. And then, yeah, I think that's it.
Could we have a motion?
Well, I would move to approve it, given those conditions. And, and one more condition, prior to the issuance of a occupancy permit, that there is we revisit the landscape design and the detail for the entry gate.
Yes.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
Have you got all that? I would like to see the neighbors welcome these people. Look. Thank you. All right. On to the next. Preliminary master development plan, the Vineyard Oak subdivision, 1901 Yountville Cross Road.
Shall we go let clear out? Should I let them clear out first?
Yeah, go ahead.
And we have to get Jason back.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes. Let the record show we're summoning Board Member Janes back to the dais. You know, we see more interpersonal stuff up here.
That's the first time I've seen that.
Well, that happened with, I think, just before you came, where the issue really wasn't design. It was sort of a grudge issue, and that's what I'm hearing here as well. You know, they're not willing to go over with a cup of chicken soup.
Well, maybe they will.
I hope. Has he fled? No, here he is.
Tried, I wouldn't let him leave.
Mr. Janes has returned, and we are ready for the staff report.
I set it up so you can use it next to the...
Interesting.
All right. This item on the agenda is a preliminary master development plan review for a residential subdivision consisting of 12 market-rate detached single-family dwellings and 4 affordable duplex dwellings that would be located on 13 parcels on Yountville Crossroads.
Could we, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's very loud. I can hardly hear you. Give them a chance to clear out.
Would it be possible to close that door?
There they go.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, whichever you prefer. This preliminary master development plan is one that's been before you at an earlier point in time. On October 14th, they presented the plan and sought the ZDRB's feedback as well as the public. That plan sought 12 exceptions from the code, and those are as follows. There was more than 25% of the single-family residential homes that exceeded the 6,500 square foot maximum. Neither duplex lot met the 5,000 square foot minimum. Both duplex lots and 3 of the single-family lots exceeded the 40% FAR. All units exceeded the height limit. The corner lot and both duplex lots failed to meet required minimum setbacks. Some garages for single-family residences were not set back 10 feet from the face of the residence. The width of many residences did not meet the requirement of being 5 feet wider than the garage. The amount of directly accessible open space for second-story duplex dwellings was a bit shy of 100 feet. More than 50% of the driveways exceeded the 100-foot width that's allowed through the master development plan process. 2 curb cuts failed to meet the minimum 10-foot separation requirement, and tandem parking in front of the duplex garages posed potential blockage issues. When the item went before the ZDRB, the applicant listened to those concerns and incorporated feedback into a revised design. They were also very open to public input, and the 12 areas of earlier nonconformity have been reduced to 2. and as part of the master development process, those can be approved. The existing site is a 2.01 acre parcel, and it's zoned mixed residential. It's located at the corner of Yountville Crossroads and Staggs View Lane, with the eastern boundary being the town limit line with agriculture off to the distance. The proposal is for complete redevelopment of that site, and all existing structures would be removed for this new subdivision. On page 2 of the staff report, a table lists the lot, the unit type, the number of stories, the lot size, the unit size, the garage, carport, and balcony areas, and the proposed FAR. And each of the floor area ratios now does not exceed the 40% requirement, and the combined total has been reduced to 36%. How they achieved this redesign, and let me mention they're posted down on the second bulletin board down there. The reconfigured site plan moved one of the duplex units from an area that was tight and constrained on the site plan and moved it to a location off of Yountville Crossroads that's shared with the other duplex unit. That resulted in the lots on Staggs View Lane becoming more standardized and more similar to the project that's across the street. The layout of the dwellings clusters for two-story units at the corner of Yountville Crossroad and Staggs View Lane, transitioning to 4 one-story units, and then alternating for the remainder of Staggs View Lane. Some sample floor plans and elevations were submitted with the packet, and these are conceptual but representative of what the applicant would like to develop for the final master development plan stage. And the duplex units are 2-story structures featuring 2 bedrooms and 1 bath each. They each feature a 103-square-foot porch or balcony that's directly accessible, and there's a greater amount of open space than was provided before in the form of yards around the structures. Access to the parking is via an 18-foot wide driveway, and that parking is tucked behind the 2 buildings. It's in the form of a 4-car carport with tandem parking in front of that. The stalls are slightly smaller than the minimum parking size requirements, but there's sufficient area in the backup space to reconfigure those so that that standard is met, and the applicant has indicated they'll be making that change. The duplex structures reach a height of just over 23 feet, which is well within the 28-foot height limit, and each of these duplex would be reserved for affordable housing. The floor plan and elevations for the single-family residence that's presented is for lots 1 and 3, and it is a 2 to 3 bedroom unit with 3 bathrooms, features an attached 2-car garage, a large 250-square foot front porch, and in the case of these 2 residences, an exception is sought as to the rear setback from the garage, and that would be reduced from 20 feet to 14 feet for that section of the residence. While we don't have any elevations for the other structures, the applicants indicated that those would be 2-story residences. The ones that are would not exceed 25 feet in height. Based on the elevations submitted, it appears the structures will exhibit a craftsman-style architecture, and that's seen in the hipped roof, the exposed rafters, the front porches, and varied stone and woodwork, which is different from the elevations that were earlier presented. The new architect on board is presenting something new to you. Various green elements are proposed with this development listed here in the staff report, and I'm sure that the applicant will go on to describe those in further detail. There are 10 oak trees present on the project site, and 7 of those would remain. They're generally clustered around the southeast portion on lots 10 through 13. A preliminary landscape plan has been submitted, and it provides the landscaping for the front yards, and the applicant has indicated that additional landscape options would be provided to purchasers before they move in, and that the full lot would be landscaped. A bioswale is proposed for the eastern boundary to direct and absorb stormwater, and that runs on generally all those back lots. Permeable pavements are proposed in the form of the driveway and many of the path areas as well. And that generally is the design and layout of this proposed subdivision. The focus tonight is more on the site layout and the lots rather than the design, as that'll be more fully developed at the next stage in this process. And as I earlier mentioned, the 12 areas of nonconformity or concern have been reduced to 2. Those 2 are the garage encroachment I mentioned earlier on lots 1 and 3, and staff is supportive of this change based on the small sizes of the lots, the fact that garages in master development plans can be set back closer to property lines when they're detached, and that these do not result in privacy impacts or intrusions. The other exception requested regards the 7 single-family lots that exceed the 6,500 square foot maximum, and staff finds that there are true and unique constraints that affect this property given all of the redesign that's occurred and the fact that they've been brought into full compliance other than these 2 standards. And we're also supportive of this as well. I mentioned the parking for the duplexes that the applicant's willing to correct. There's also an issue with a few of the front porches, I can't recall how many, that encroach into the front yard, but that's also something that will be revised, so that won't be an issue later on. Staff just wants to simply address the height because there are 1- and 2-story units on this property, and 4 of them are located at the corner of Yountville Crossroads and Stag's Leap, Stag's View. And staff is supportive of this location as well because of the better location of the duplex unit being tucked away and off of Stag's View Lane, being on a bigger parcel that makes that a workable and conforming lot. And with the number of 2-story residences that could be placed on this lot, it works to group those together instead of separating them out. Briefly, that's a description of the property. I can answer any questions, and the applicant is here as well.
Good report, thank you. Do we have questions of staff? Yes. Jason, you want to?
I have 4 questions. The first, on lot number 2, to me, that's a fourplex, not 2 duplexes, since it's on 1 lot, irrespective of the fact that it's 2 detached structures. And so my reading in the zoning ordinance is that that requires a use permit and specific findings to be met. So do you anticipate that when this goes to council, it will be for a use permit hearing?
We hadn't anticipated that in our earlier review of this project, but we can
So that's a question.
definitely look at that, and since the use permit is before the town council, it can be addressed by that time.
Okay, because there are specific findings that need to be met for a fourplex, not a duplex, but a fourplex, and I think this should be considered a fourplex. Second question, I'm confused. You've mentioned lots number 1 and 3, the garage setback as being non-compliant. Am I misreading the ordinance that garage or other accessory structures may encroach into rear and side setbacks provided they provide a minimum distance of 5 feet?
That would be an accessory structure that's detached, and when it's connected to the main structure, it's considered part of that.
So that only applies if the garage is detached?
Detached.
Okay. The ordinance doesn't provide any specific mitigation for removal of heritage oak trees. To the best of my knowledge, has there been any specific mitigation proposed?
We need to get a greater idea of how many oak trees are present on the property. The aerial and lot views show that only 1 tree would be removed, although the tree survey indicates that there are 10 oaks on the property rather than 8. So, And with regards to mitigation measures, those would accompany those removals and considerations.
And my last question off of the staff report, it mentions a couple of times the different levels of affordability and how the affordable units will be spread throughout that. My recollection is there are 4 levels of affordability: moderate, low, and very, very low, rather than 3. So is that changed?
Statewide, there are 4, but here in Yountville, we don't have the very, very low.
Okay. So there will be 2 of one kind and
One each of the other.
Those are my questions for now. Thank you, Sandra.
Sandra, those affordable units will all be on Yountville Crossroad, is that what I'm reading?
Yes.
Question?
Actually, I just had one main question. That was the duplex versus fourplex question. So, same exact thing as what Mr. James was asking. It seems to me the fourplex as well, and I'd just like to see how that shakes out.
The affordable units that, it was my understanding that we would try to get units that house children off of the crossroads. That has not been addressed?
Before, I think the reason, part of the reason for that on the earlier plan was that the lots were so small, there was no open space. This one's directed inward and away from Yountville Crossroads, and we feel the applicant has addressed some of the concerns with children. They're not forced out in the street. They have areas on the property where they could be.
Will there be fencing around those units?
I'll let the applicant address that.
Okay. Are we ready to listen to the applicant? Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Eric Knight, 6638 Jefferson Street. Thank you again for an opportunity to come before you, and I appreciate your time this evening. I just wanted to say that last fall we appreciated your comments, and I think because of those comments, the comments we heard also from the neighbors as well, that I decided that we needed to have a new architect look at the project, and so we did hire a new architect to look at the site plan and the architecture, and we met in December with town staff, and I think by looking at the staff report, I think we've come as close as we can to meeting the ordinances, and I think we've made a great move in terms of with this project and the design. I think it fits in the neighborhood, and so I'm looking forward to having Healthy Building review it with you tonight. Bob Massaro, who's a principal at Healthy Building in Napa, will be making the presentation. And also here tonight is Sarah Rosenthal. She's a principal at Healthy Building and also will be following the LEED certification for our project whenever we do get off the ground. So thanks very much for an opportunity to come before you again this evening, and I look forward to answering any of your questions or neighbors' questions later after our presentation.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bob Massaro with Healthy Buildings in Napa. We're going to spend maybe 15 minutes going through some of the design features, the site layout, and so on, address some of the issues in the staff report, and give you what we think is the best solution for this property. We're calling this version 4 because this is the 4th version we brought to the public. By our counts, we're at 13. So there's been a lot of internal work to get us here. I wanted to make a comment too before I get into the slides. I've never had a client like the Knight family. I've never seen a client work so hard to satisfy public opinion and work with the neighbors. And the fact that we're through 13 different versions, and public version number 4 really speaks highly of the Knights and what they're trying to do and try to be a good member of this community. So that's just an aside. The project is, as it was from the beginning and is now or wherever shall be, a LEED Gold project. Healthy Buildings is bringing several projects through lead in the Napa Valley, and I was quite thrilled to see that the agenda following us has to do with green building for Yountville. It will be a zero energy residential project. Zero energy means that at the end of the year, the people who live in this house will have a zero PG&E bill, and it will be powered by the sun, by photovoltaics. We have actually successfully designed and built zero energy homes, and we're doing others throughout the valley. So this will be actually the first ones that will be completely built. Next slide, please. We did this as an interesting version. These are the 4 that have come before the public. 2006, there were 18 lots, 22 dwellings. 2007, 13 lots, 16 dwellings. The last time we saw you, 14 lots and 17, including a granny. And now we bring forward 13 lots and 16. Next slide, please. Just as an overview, it is at the corner of Yountville Crossroads and Staggs View, approximately 2 acres. It is the mixed residential zoning. The combined FAR right now is at 0.36. The original versions were at 0.4 and slightly higher. We mentioned the density. This is the different mix of floor plans. There are 5 different floor plans. When you put reverses in and different materials, no one house will look like the other. 58% are a single-family house with 1 story, and 25% of this project is affordable. Next slide. This is a superimposed aerial view. It used to take us weeks to do this. Now it takes about 2 hours, thanks to Google. These are the existing houses across the street. You can see they're fairly large, 2-story, most of them. This is the proposed development on the other side of the street. As Sandra mentioned, this cluster is 2 stories, followed by 4 1-stories, 2 stories, 1 story, 2 story, 1 story, 2 story, 1 story. I wanted to address the issue of the oaks, and I'll show this in another slide. I believe, and Lori, the landscape architect, is here. She can address that specific question about the oaks, but I believe we're only taking down 1 oak. Next slide. This is a really interesting slide because, as Eric says, we're on architect number 2 and team number a lot. And the reason is this has been so challenging is, first of all, we have a long, narrow, pie-shaped lot. And everything that's black or dark-colored, we can't build in. There's an existing easement here for sewer. There's an existing easement here for storm drains. These are the oaks that we're protecting. And then we get into rear yard setbacks and front yard setbacks. So the original envelope of the property has been significantly reduced by constraints having to do with code and setbacks and trees and existing easements. So I just wanted to show you this because part of the thing we've been wrestling with as we go through iteration after iteration is the geometry of the lot. And as I mentioned to you the last time I was here, part of the reason we came back to you is not only to show you this solution, but to get feedback, because as Sandra mentions, we are now down to 2 exemptions. We started a lot, but we're down to 2, which I think are very, very manageable. And by the way, just to address your points also, the porches and the garage issue, we'll take care of those. We will change that and fix that. Next slide, please. This is the new site. This is the original site plan. We were here, and if you'll notice, we had an affordable duplex there, and we had an affordable duplex there, and then a series of 2 stories. The small ones were 2, 1 story, 2, 1, so on. This is the last site plan that we brought forward, and it had all of the exemption requests and other issues associated with it. Next slide, please. This is where we are now, and we've broken it up into 2 slides so you can see it a little bit better. We have a 2-story market rate unit here. Behind it is a 2-story duplex, tandem units, 1 downstairs, 1 upstairs. I understand that for planning purposes this is considered a 4-plex, but I'm just calling it a duplex in terms of as a structure. It's 2 units. This also is a 2-unit affordable housing project. So what we've done is we've brought the affordable housing entrance off of Yountville Crossroads into parking areas. That was the other exemption. Into parking areas, and then put 2 units here, 2 units there. From the the point about the children, you can see that they're well set back from the street, and there is a fence. In answer to your question, there is a fence that essentially goes through here. They will still have the ability to get out the driveway, but they would have that pretty much everywhere else. But the rest of the perimeter is just children safe as we can make it. We have a 2-story unit here, 2, 1, 1, 1, and so on. Next slide, please. And then we alternate. The larger ones are 1 story, the smaller ones are 2. And we did that because of the trees. You can see all of these trees here that we're saving. And we did have a tree report. We talked about the umbrellas and how to protect the trees during construction, how the foundations would affect the trees. I mean, part of green building is to not cut down trees. So we did limit it as much as possible. Next slide, please. This and the next slide we feel very good about. This is the issue we're trying to address. This is the requirement per Yountville. This is where we are, where we were in 2008. And remember, in 2008, we had hit a wall. We couldn't get over that. So at that point, the FAR was 0.4. We're now down to 0.36. And by the way, this is lower, because in that calculation, we included stairs and mechanical rooms. And if we come back and pull those out, that number is going to go down even further. So that's gross heated space, including stairs. So that the FAR is lower. The lot size, at the time, both duplexes were less than 5,000 feet. Now we have 2 duplexes on 1 lot, or a quadplex. The rest of the conditions, as they exist, lot line setback, we now comply with Yountville's code. Height limit, we now comply with Yountville's code. Building width, we now comply. Setbacks, we now comply. Curb cuts, comply. Driveways, comply. Parking, comply. And that's why, and by the way, staff, and particularly Sandra, who I know is new here, she's done a great job of analyzing this. And that's why, we're down to 2 exemptions. Next slide, please. These are the 2 requested exemptions. One has to do with the fact that 7 of the 12 single-family lots exceed 6,500, which is 58% as opposed to 25%. So we're asking for an exemption there. And the garages on Lot 1 and Lot 3 encroach 6 feet into the 20-foot rear yard setback. These are attached garages, so the exemption that Commissioner James mentioned wouldn't apply here. But I wanted to, if you visually, we won't go back on the slide, but visually go back to that one slide that showed all the black area that was not buildable. We were here at 12 exemptions at one time. We're now down to 2, which I think personally are fairly minimal in terms of impact. Next slide, please. These are the street elevations, which are also put up over here. And these are, I want to emphasize this, these are true to scale. They're done by the computer. They're not done, to embellish. And one of the points that was really clear, and we should have done this, and I wish we had, and we will for council, if you superimpose the Stag View Hills here, they're very clearly in the background. So what we are proposing is 2 stories, as we said, 1, 2, alternating back and forth. So this is the Stag's View Lane image. Next slide, please. This is Yountville Crossroads. Now, you can see a little. First of all, I want to just point out, yes, we have 2-story units here at Yountville Crossroads. This is 1 market rate unit. This is 2 affordable units. But we've really gone into true, authentic craftsmen, spent the money on the outside as far as the details. And when we get to the architectural features, not in this presentation, but the next one, we talk about materials. We've got the stone and the brick that's classic craftsman, the divided light windows, the board and batten, the rafter tails. I mean, these are true craftsmen, and I think Yountville will be quite pleased to have this type of architecture in this area. That's my humble opinion. You can see the driveway here leading down towards that would access the 2 affordable units. Next slide. Okay. Am I doing with the slide? We can, okay. What we've done here is we've come forward what we think is the best solution. We have 4 affordable housing units. We think the best design, the best mix of so on and so forth. But get back to my initial point about the Knights family, listening to the neighbors, listening to the ZDRB. So we've come up with some alternate scenarios that we like to think address the neighbors' concerns, and we want to show why in some cases the alternate scenarios work and in other cases they don't work. And we'd like your comments and feedback, and I'm sure some of the neighbors will also want to make some comments on that. Now, staff has not analyzed these, but it's important to bring them forward as a discussion item to talk about the fact that, yes, we do want to listen to the neighbors, and we have, and Eric has gone out of his way, and we've come up with different scenarios. Next slide, please. No, we can go to the next one. This is, just to reemphasize, this is the current site plan. This is the one that's on the staff report. This is the one we'd like to go forward with, showing a 2-story unit there, 2-story, two affordable units there, 2 affordable units there. Next slide, please. And again, this is the current elevation from Staggs View Lane. Just bringing these back up. Next slide. This is an alternative that addresses the neighbors across the street's concern about view line. Because what we've done here is, on Lot 1, we've lowered this to a 1-story. And we've done that by essentially bringing the parking semi-subterranean. So they're actually going to drive down into their parking. It's important, we believe, to keep the 4 affordable units there. But this is an alternative that increases the cost of construction on that lot, but does, we hope, address the neighbor's concern from across the street. And again, staff has not had the opportunity. As a matter of fact, this is a relatively new component of this design. Next slide. From Staggs View, you can see that this is now a 1-story. The area over the garage is slightly raised, but you can see beyond. That's the house in the background. I'm sorry. That's mislabeled. That is Crossroads View, because here we're back to the driveway coming off the Crossroads. Mm-hmm. Next slide, please. This one is another alternative that, for purposes of discussion, we wanted to bring forward. It is not one that we think is beneficial to Yountville. This alternative leaves the 1-story with the semi-subterranean garage in Lot 1, but it removes an affordable unit. So now, right there, we have a single-story affordable unit and then a 2-story affordable, and back to the market rate. This does create a lower profile on Yountville Crossroads, but essentially what it does is it means that affordable unit needs to go somewhere else down the road. In other words, it's going to go behind one of the units on Staggs View Lane, or we don't know where yet, but it does create that challenge, which then creates some circulation problems. In other words, we're going to end up with flag lots and so on. And it's going to increase the density. In other words, we're going to put it, right now it's on top of another unit, so we're not removing green space, and we're not increasing footprint. But if we move that 4th affordable unit somewhere else, I think what happens is we start to require more exemptions, and we're kind of going back up the exemption list. So if we go back a couple, please, Sarah. One more, please. So in looking at, and let's go to the site plan. That's good. In looking at, again, all of the parameters associated with this project, we feel that this one addresses as many of the issues as possible, and we think provides the best possible solution, and we're pleased to see that staff does support this application. So with that, I'll conclude my formal part of the presentation, and we would like to come back and address any questions you may have or any questions that the neighbors may bring up. So on that part, I'll thank you for your time.
Good report. Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address this issue?
Hi, I'm Angela Hayes. I live at 9 Staggs View Lane. I'd just like to say that I've attended all the meetings on this development, and the past proposals I've had objections to. but this one, I feel the Knight family did listen to the neighbors. I like the location of the duplexes. It's in the widest portion of the lot, so I think there's more room there. I would prefer the other side of our street to totally mimic our side, but you could always have to compromise, and I think the compromise was acceptable. I do have concerns with the exterior. I would like to see it look like it belongs from our homes. You know, our homes are made out of wood, and I don't know if they were proposing stucco or what the architect has drawn up yet. I guess it's a little premature, but I would like to see, you know, make the development look like it belongs together, like Washington Park. You know that that's a development, you know it belongs together, and that's what I would like to see as far as the architect. But otherwise, I like this plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sharon Stensis, 1 Staggs View Lane. I want to thank the Knight family, and especially Eric Knight, for fostering good communications with the neighbors, and also want to commend them for all the energy-saving features that they've built into the plan. But otherwise, we don't like version 4 very much. I have a letter here that I have made copies for all of you, and I'll read portions of it now. We oppose these revised plans for the following reasons. The concentration of massing 6 two-story units at one end, the north end of this property, is extreme and unfair. We believe this subjects our adjacent single-family home to significantly more than its fair share of negative impacts from this development, and that includes the destruction of our much-enjoyed and valuable view corridor to the east and north, noise from 6 units as opposed to 1 or 2, and the prospects of looking upon a massive amount of hardscape, parking lot, driveways, and a new street off of Yountville Crossroads. So that's kind of our personal objection. And then when we came, and I don't remember which version it was, but spoke about this before, we spoke about the opportunity to express the entrance to the town at this point. And we think this squanders that opportunity for the town of Yountville to make its northeast entrance to its environs attractive and memorable. From our 11 years in residence across the street from this property, we know this spot is a source of delight to many pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists who they just stop here at all times of the year to admire its beauty and to take photographs. We urge that you not let this opportunity to enhance what is obviously one of the most frequently used entrances to Yountville escape you by facing it with less than the most desirable plans and designs. And we really don't see that this is an improvement over the previous design. So you say, so what should we do? I don't know. I just know that the view to the east is magnificent because we enjoy that. We do know that people come in to Yountville and they say, oh, this is a special place. We want that to be expressed. I'm not sure that a fourplex expresses that as the gateway to Yountville. And I haven't seen any of that addressed in this plan, and I'm a little sorry about that. This is also the last residential property that we see for Yountville. There has been talk sometimes of having granny units that with deed restrictions to maintain their affordability over time. Not the most desirable from the standpoint maybe of the buyer, but maybe this is a time to experiment with something like this because this is really the last opportunity to do that. Again, the idea of the landscaping, Eric has expressed his strong commitment to landscaping that gateway area so that it expresses what Yountville is. But I still think that over time, the landscaping would be better if it better cared for if there was the pride of ownership rather than something that was cared for by a public entity such as Napa Valley Community Housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Does the applicant want to speak to any of those concerns?
Thank you again. Eric Knight, 6638 Jefferson. And Bob probably can address some of these issues, but I knew the biggest concern in terms of where we're at tonight is these 3 lots. And so that's certainly why I met with Oscar and Sharon and talked about the possibility of the 1-story on Lot 1, but preserving the duplexes, the 4-plex on the back for the affordable housing. And it's not that I didn't talk with John Massaro or the architect to see about the possibility of the 1-story affordable, but the challenges it created of then adding another affordable either on the street on Staggs View Lane and the compaction and parking issues was, I still feel that this provides the best opportunity for the affordable housing. But briefly, I just want to say, I mean, right now when you're looking at this plan here, the dotted large dot, small dot, double dot line here that shows the property line doesn't really show the corner of the property. Currently, there isn't a bulb out there. We plan to put a bulb out on that corner to help reduce traffic flow on Staggs View Lane. I think we've even talked about doing something like that mid block to just reduce what sometimes becomes a speeding block because it's so open. So what's not really shown there is a significant amount of setback, not from the property lines, but the sidewalk that will go all the way around to the crossroads, and just landscaping that will be on there, and certainly the opportunity for the first duplex being set back, not a side yard, but set back 20 feet. That there's a lot of setbacks. So I think there's a great opportunity with the potential of putting a 1-story on Lot 1 and the landscaping on that corner and certainly the type of building that we will do on that corner that will make it a very memorable entrance into town. It's, I think, the best spot for the affordable housing, for the issues that of privacy and concerns we've heard over the last 3 years from neighbors on Staggs View Lane, and the opportunity we can to build 2 very attractive and only 1,600 square foot. I mean, each unit is only about 750 square feet. So that building is about 20 foot wide by 22 foot wide by something. I mean, there's 16 square foot units in of themselves. So I think they'll be designed, landscaped beautifully. I think it'll be a very attractive entrance into town. So thank you again. And I think Bob maybe have a few other comments. So,
if I may, in particular, Bob, will you address Angela Hayes' question about the exterior?
Oh, yes. First of all, Angela, thank you for what you said. If we can go to the elevations for a second, Sarah? Anyone? That one's fine. Essentially what we're doing here is we're going back to the original Craftsman style that Frank Lloyd Wright and a bunch of other architects over the history did. And it's always a combination of 3 materials, brick and stone, and you can see it here in the lower area and in the chimney. And we've got different materials here. And some combination of stucco and board and batten. And the other, if we can go to the, do we have the street elevation? Yeah. There we go. So what we've done here, for example, Angela's down in here, I think across from Lot 7 and so on. So that one is a combination of board and batten and stucco, and this one is a combination of board and batten and stone. Material-wise, the houses across the street are primarily stucco. Am I correct? Primarily stucco? Primarily wood. They're the hardy panels and so on. So the straightforward answer is they're not going to look like the units across the street. There's a combination of materials that we're using: brick and stone, board and batten, and stucco. You wanted to I hope I answered that, though probably not as well as she had liked. Lori's here to address any questions on the oak tree. So before I go into some of Sharon's concerns, do you have any questions about the one oak tree? Okay.
I'll repeat my question. What mitigation do you propose for its removal?
Lori?
Lori Kagwin Carey, landscape architect. We actually have a potential of removing 2 trees. One for sure in Lot 13, and possibly Lot 11 because of the canopy of the tree overhanging the structure. I met with...
Let me show them where they are. So you can see the dotted line here, the one tree there, and then the dotted line right there, where there's trees, there's houses.
It's a multi-stem tree for Lot 11, so it was hard, I think, for the architect to find out where the trunk was. We have a replacement ratio submitted by the arborist of 3:1, but in my design, it's more like 12:1.
Can you express that as a function of aggregate diameter? For example, if the tree you're taking out is 36 inches DBH, are you providing 6 trees? That's the mitigation I would propose, is that it be related to the size of the existing tree, not the quantity of the existing tree. So, for example, for every 6 inches of trunk diameter, you plant 1 tree. That's a standard in a neighboring jurisdiction, rather than 3 trees for every 1.
These particular trees are smaller diameters. They're all multi-stem. So as for
the multi-stems aggregate, if there are 5,
there may be 8-inch diameter, the 2 of them. They're smaller trees with an aggregate maybe 12. And the trees that we're proposing are either 15-gallon or 24-inch box trees. There'll be street trees along the whole frontage of the project, Quercus lobatus. There may be a combination of Quercus lobatus and a blue oak, so we have a little variety, but they'll all be oaks. And
Lori, will some of those street trees, though, be required to be planted regardless as, in fact, street trees, not necessarily as mitigation? I'm
well,
more focusing on a straight replacement for the removed trees, not trees that might be planted anyway.
Well, the arborist that has been employed by Eric, Joe Schneider, Pacific Tree Care, recommended a replacement ratio of 3:1. And 3:1 could be 24-inch box as the largest tree. So we could have a percentage of these frontage trees as 24-inch box, which would be the 3:1 ratio, so that would be 9 trees. Actually, no, there'd be 6 trees. If there's 2 times 3, 6. And then the remainder could be 15-gallon.
Thank you.
What else was important? All the trees are healthy that are existing. We just have to be careful with the bioswales around them, and that's going to be addressed. So we're taking good care of retaining these trees and making sure that trees that are replaced in this project are native species that complement that area. And actually the namesake. Thank you. Anything else? Other questions?
No, thank you.
Sarah, can you go back to the Google image, please? I wanted to address some of Sharon's comments, or all of them, actually. Okay, this is Oscar and Sharon's house right here. And in the last iteration, last year, we proposed 2-story houses across here. And one of the things that this picture doesn't show is that these houses on this side of the street are actually about 4 feet higher than the other side of the street. There's been some fill put in here. So we established story poles there. And Oscar was there. We established a series of story poles right here. And myself and Oscar, and I think Eric was also there, went upstairs to the 2nd floor. And we were very surprised, pleasantly, to see that the view from the 2nd story is not obstructed. And at that time, the roof lines were higher than we're proposing right now. Because really what happens is, most of the view, if you look right here, there's a beautiful, the best part of the view is actually this way, because there's obviously vineyards and then the hills. But the point is, from the second story, none of the Stag's Leap, from about maybe 20 feet above Silverado Trail up is clear. You can see it, given the story poles that we established. And it would be interesting, I think, and we can do this, because I think Oscar and Sharon would feel a little bit more comfortable. We could create a computer-generated image that showed from their house what their views would be of the actual hills. And when we did the first study with story poles, we were pleasantly surprised that very little of the view was obstructed. So I wanted to bring up that point. The massing at the yes, Eric. Yes, thank you. This is their house right there, and if you'll notice, what we've done is there's a view corridor right through the middle here. So we've tried to maintain a direct view to the vineyards, but even all of these houses here at two-story, these homes here will still maintain the majority of the hillsides beyond. The other point that Eric brought up that I wanted to talk about is this is Yountville Crossroads, and you can see how far back the houses are set back, because the property line is back here, and then the sidewalks and so on. So the actual effect, this unit, for example, is, we can scale this out, but it's fairly significant far back from that corner. So from the massing viewpoint, we try to mitigate that with the landscaping materials and with the setbacks. The entrance to the city, that's an important issue, and we feel that the extra effort we're putting into the architecture and the materials we're putting into this, I think, speaks well of the entrance to the city. The general plan for this property is for exactly what we're doing. As a matter of fact, we're in the mid-range of the general plan designation. So if there was to be some other use for this property as a gateway to Yountville, it really should have been addressed in the general plan. But what we're trying to do here is stay within the general plan designation. The granny unit, I'm very happy she brought that up, because they've tried this in other jurisdictions where a home that sells for above $1 million will have a granny unit that's designated affordable, and it's supposed to be $400 a month rent. Unfortunately, what the jurisdictions have found is that, how do you police that? So you can make it a deed restriction, but as soon as that first tenant moves out, what has happened is a tenant moves in who pays $2,000 a month for that, and you've lost the affordable component. So in other jurisdictions where they've tried that it's very, very hard to police it. I'm sorry, you're quite quizzical. Am I clear?
How is it more difficult to police than any other affordable restricted dwelling unit, Bob?
You have to, okay, if you make it a deed restriction such that every time the unit turns over, the city or a designated agency is involved in the decision, then you can police it. So every time the unit rents, it goes to town manager or someone who says, yes, you can go ahead and let that person in. Most jurisdictions didn't want the headache. What we've done here is, and get back to the pride of ownership issue that Sharon talked about, these are not for sale units. These are rental units. So there's tremendous control that the governing agency will have over these tenants. If they start working with their car, all the bad things you can think about. If that starts to happen immediately, and I can speak very well of Napa Valley Community Housing, they do a good job of policing. And actually, they won't have this. Well, they may have this, but the point is, any affordable housing agency polices that. So by making the rentals as opposed to for sale units, there's control that wouldn't exist the otherwise, and that's a pride of ownership. And I've tried to address all of them to the best of my ability. Is there any questions I can answer of any of you?
I do think I have one more question, and it's also directed to Sandra. There's been talk of requests for 2 exceptions. It's actually 3, is it not? Because we have the lot size over 8,000 square feet. So there's one lot over 8,000.
I wasn't familiar that was one of the exception requests. I thought that they all met, and I'd have to go back and look closer at the code to determine if that's one.
Isn't lot number 2, 9,200 square feet?
It is, and I don't believe there's an 8,000 square foot limit on that.
Okay. Ms.
We'll look into that a little more closely.
Seem to think so.
I might have been, I think I was actually mistaken on that. And I think it's because there is that restriction for there's the restrictions for single family, but I think because that's a duplex lot, the duplexes fall under different lot size requirements.
And that's correct.
So I would definitely defer to Sandra on that than me.
Okay. That's all for now. Thank you.
We've tried to meet the challenge to the best of our ability. Thank you for your time.
Good report, thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this issue? Yes.
I just want to say briefly, Rob Winterberg, that I applaud them for the gold LEED rating. We haven't talked enough about that. Sure, the entrance to Yountville is important, but I really think we should, and it's coming up later, have more of these as a standard. That's all.
Could I have your last name one more time?
Winterberg,
Spell?
WENNERBERG.
Address?
5A Burgundy Way, Yountville.
Thank you.
Oscar Rhodes, 1 Staggs View Lane. There was a comment that the architect stated on the last review. Unfortunately, they've already had 4. Eric Knight and his family, which I have highest respect for, I said, hey, you could put a 2-story home across the street because I want him to do well. But I said, whatever you do, don't put the 2-story home to the right of my neighbor across the street. So I was happy to do that one corner, but I didn't like the massing. But it was fine with me if he wanted to put one in front of me, but I didn't want it on that lot 3, as it's called now, because I didn't think it was fair to my neighbor. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. What do we think?
Well, I have not been involved in the other hearings, so this is new to me, and I'm going to defer to my board mates for the moment for this time.
Well, I'll jump in. First, a clarification. Sandra, this project, as presently comprised, would need to provide 2 affordable units, would it not?
That's correct.
So I think that's an important distinction, that the 2 additional affordable units, that triggers the project being allowed a 40% FAR. So there's a choice there being made that increases the total size of the project. When we talk about some difficulties in finding homes for the units, that's because a choice has been made to have 2 additional affordable units, which makes every house on the property larger. With that said, I think clearly the applicant should be commended. They've worked tremendously hard to satisfy this. When I hear Angela say she is overall pleased, I think that speaks well of them. Getting to the heart, and we're just making recommendations today of the exceptions, I don't find the request for the reduced setback on lots 1 and 3 for the garages objectionable. I think the purpose of setbacks are to either provide usable space for people living on those lots or not to deleteriously affect the neighbors. And in this case, these garages essentially face other parking areas. So I don't think that diminishes the use and enjoyment of those properties. On the 6,500 square foot lot area, I still wrestle with that a little bit. Again, I'll point out that condition becomes operative because a voluntary bonus has been requested for the high affordable quotient. That 6,500 square foot exemption is a choice that's being made. With that said, I am generally not averse to it because I think the alternative is more lots and more houses and actually increased units. So I'm gently in support of that. The next thing I think that's been brought up is fair. One is that the ordinance, as I read it, says that the affordable units should be generally dispersed throughout the project. Here they're all in one location, and in and of itself, I don't think that's terrible, particularly where they're sited. I do think it's a fair criticism, though, to say that there are 4 two-story buildings all at one end of the project. I like seeing them dispersed so that kind of each neighbor has at least a portion across the street, 1 story, and a portion 2-story. So I think that's a fair criticism, and that the council should consider finding a way, without necessarily reducing the total number of units, to disperse that. And again, I hasten to repeat that it's those extra 2 affordable units mean a 40% FAR is allowed on all the single-family market rate, and that has a value. So I think that was a fair criticism, that it's unduly at one end of the property. I think that summarizes the exceptions. I'll say one last thing about the 2-story. We're somewhat constrained by the way the ordinance is written, which I really think should be corrected. We can't say no to 2-story multifamily. There's no restriction like there is for single-family dwellings. That's something we have a counselor here tonight. I strongly encourage the council to look at because it benefits multifamily dwellings. With that said, I want to repeat, clearly the applicant has worked extremely hard to address all of the concerns, and to get down to these 2, the setback I don't find objectionable, and I'm gently supportive of the exception to 6,500. And they deserve to be commended for that. It's a good project. I do think aggregating all the 2-story at one end of the project, it should be dispersed. That summarizes my comments. Thank you.
I appreciate very much the efforts the Knight family and their design team have gone to, and the changes that have taken place. I like how this is shaping up, and I like very much how the landscape architecture. I think Lori's done a great job, and the palette is looking really good. I think that, and if I understand correctly, the landscape options for the backyard will be part of the review process further on down the road, and I think that's going to be critical. And in terms of the exceptions, the 2 nonconformities, the front porches and the parking stall dimensions, as I understand, are going to be remedied. And for the garage setbacks, I too am in more or less favor of that. I think anything you can do to push the garages back from the public view of the street and that kind of open realm there is a good thing, and I'd be in favor of that. Just in real general terms, I'm liking how, like I said already, I'm liking how this is shaping up. I do have one big concern, and that is the massing towards the north end of the property. I think it's a foregone conclusion that views in one way or another are going to be affected by the project in general. I think having the 2 stories concentrated at the north end is problematic, not just for the neighbors, but in terms of a public amenity as a view shed. And so I don't know what you do about that. I don't have solutions, but I think that's something that needs some more fleshing out. And I think if you want to sell the idea, there needs to be some photo simulations or something, both going north on Staggs View and east on Yountville Crossroad, something that helps us and the public better understand, exactly how those buildings affect the views. Not that it can't be worked out, but I at least would prefer to understand more about how that looks. That's it.
Finally, I concur with my board members, except I really don't have any trouble with the massing at the Yountville Cross. It seems to me, given the lot size, you almost have to be there. So I don't have a great deal of problem with that. One thing that has not been mentioned and should be is the fact that you have a green plan, and that's remarkable. I think my hat's off to you. Wish you all kinds of luck.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
The issue of massing that the two gentlemen have brought up, how do you feel about mitigating your concern by this being a one-story? So in other words, when you're coming this way down Crossroads, you're going to see a one-story, then a two. When you come this way, you'll see a two-story, then a one. I mean, do you think that satisfactorily addresses the concern about the massing at the north end?
I think it's an improvement, and I think in terms of going eastward on the crossroads there, it does help because there is a stepping effect from one story to two story to the mountains behind it. So I think that is an improvement. The two duplexes on the east end, as they back Vineyard, they're gonna stand out as beacons, if you will, on the eastern end, and that would still be a concern on my part, and maybe that can be mitigated through a little bit more articulation in the facades. If I remember correctly, they're depicted as kind of straight up and
To break the elevation so that the second floor is stepped back from the first floor.
that would help. I mean, in a perfect world, I'd love to see them as one story, but if they had to be two stories, having some stepping effect and some more articulation in the elevation would certainly help.
For my part, Bob, I'm more inclined to support alternating entirely, single-story, two-story, or vice versa. With that said, I think Mr. Lamborn's comments earlier were trenchant, that perhaps some more developed exhibits of what the perspective would be from the street, which you described earlier as 20 feet above the elevation of the trail. I think that would help me get there. But
Great,
I'm
great.
initially more inclined to say alternate.
Got it. Excellent. Thank you very much.
I'm willing to look at more evidence, or to the council, which is, I think, where you'll be next.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sandra, do you need anything more from us?
No.
All right. Good luck. Green Building Code.
Madam Chair, may we just sit for about a minute? Because unless there's people from the public here waiting to hear about the Green Building Code, can we change the order of the agenda now, or is it too late once we adopted it? Is it too late?
I think it may be too late.
Okay.
There may be an opportunity to.
Madam Chair, I am recusing myself from discussion on item 9.2. I am persuaded that given my application and the fact that my employer will have 5 additional building permits pulled in Yountville, that I can't participate without affecting our bottom line.
All
Makes
right.
sense? So I'm going to get my book again and go outside.
What if we were to have the staff reports before that so you could go home?
Well, that's what I was just asking, but my
We may be able to amend it. Why not?
If we're
I move that we
unanimous,
amend the agenda to have the staff reports now.
I second the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're going to change the amendment. Yeah, that seems silly.
Believe me, I want to stay, but I shouldn't. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, I hadn't prepared any specific report, so I'd be
Okay.
happy to answer any questions you might have about what's going on in town. And answer any questions if I can.
Do we have any questions? Who's run off with whom?
Pardon?
Who's run off with whom?
I'm not privy to those things.
Okay.
Well, I guess I can address the Bardesano project, which opened last Monday, and it had a big open home, and it's off to a start. We're pleased to see that that project is completed and up and operational, and other projects are moving along.
Do you know if they, at the Bardesano project, do they have rooms rented out?
As I understood it, the first day there were 6 rooms rented, and they're looking on having more people stay. They're still in their soft opening stage with a more full grand opening later this month, I think about the 3rd week in February. So perhaps then they'll see more, but I don't really know all that much with their occupancy.
Okay.
And I got a call from a concerned citizen, somebody steady and pleasant, who hoped that when the Pierre Gentil project came to us, we would vote it down. But of course, that he was late and we did not. But it's different. I'm sure there will be.
So on that note, we will be taking the Vita restaurant project to Town Council at its next meeting a week from today. And also at that meeting will be the Sorrento project, which you saw for last time in December. So those are
It
two
may be
projects
on-
that may be at their final stage,
Yeah.
depending on what happens.
Yeah, it may be a peanut butter and sandwich kind of meeting, you know, if people come forward and object.
And since you heard it as a board, it's had the article in the paper and the
Yes.
photographs, so
Yeah,
people's
and that-
awareness of it is different at this stage.
That triggered it. And of course, you can't tell from a picture at all. But you either like modern, you know, as we went through the Bartizono, there was a lot of different opinions about what people were perceiving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, design, I would say, is very subjective, so
Yeah.
Why I only wear
That's
two
out
color
there.
clothes.
Huh?
Why I only wear two color clothes. I do have a serious question. I have a sense that there's a general plan update or even a zoning and design review ordinance update coming. Is that true? Am I
Those are
misguided? Because I'm
both-
brimming with ideas on how to fix them both.
Are you? Well, that's good.
it'll
Both are
take them
forthcoming. I guess what Bob and I first wanted to do was bring suggestions for zoning and design ordinance changes to you. We know there's a lot of substantive areas that need correction, and those will definitely be noticed. It'll come first before you as a board. There are also some organizational issues with those two documents where they could read easier. With that said, we also are planning on doing a general plan update, and we plan to send out RFP sometime late spring, and hopefully obtaining a consultant sometime this summer. The issue of these two important projects going along side by side is that we might be premature with the Zoto changes, but we also feel like there's some immediate things that need addressing. So we're sort of coming to grasp with that as a department and what would be the best way of proceeding. So they're forthcoming. Keep your eye out.
Okay. Green issues.
So
All right.
you will excuse me and adjourn without me, since again I'm recusing myself from that item.
Yes.
All right.
We will miss you.
Good night.
All right, good night.
Well, the town has decided that it's time to look at green building issues and a potential green building code, given the environmental impact that buildings can have, the concern over greenhouse gases, the town's involvement in the countywide initiative to study greenhouse gases and come up with targets for reduction. So we're beginning to consider these issues, and that's why it's before you tonight. It's simply an introduction and a place to start discussing what we are doing. Staff wanted to present to you what other California jurisdictions are doing to get an idea of the different options. We're lucky to have Bob in the audience tonight, since he's been instrumental in this entire field and getting things going. So the staff report starts out by saying, what is green building? And it is a whole systems approach, really. It means siting buildings to maximize natural lighting, heating and cooling in order to reduce total energy use. It's landscaping with native and drought-tolerant species, and using a water-wise landscaping. Landscaping accounts for most of a normal residence's water use, especially in the summer. It's looking at energy-efficient and water-saving appliances, fixtures, and technologies. It's incorporating durable, recycled, and sustainably harvested materials, And it's also looking at reducing and recycling construction and demolition waste. These have a lot of benefits, and so it's important we start looking at them. What we did is we looked at the different ordinances in California, and one of the main things that jurisdictions do is utilize a rating system to evaluate building performance. And that's exactly what the project that we saw earlier was doing. It's selected the LEED standard. LEED for homes sets up a point system where you can get points for incorporating certain practices, and there are also certain prerequisites that are needed. Those different levels vary from certified on the lower end up to platinum. We heard tonight that this project, the Vineyard Oaks project, is seeking to do a gold standard, which is certainly on the higher end of that scale. When you look at the different jurisdictions, many have adopted a mandatory certified or silver level, but a few have gone as far as to require the the gold, I'm sorry. And that applies to LEED, which is generally known to apply to commercial projects, but it's also, in just last year, adopted a residential system. And turning back toward that project, that's what that was using. An alternative to the LEED system is the Green Points rated program through Build It Green. And it also uses the point system approach, and it just has a different rating system. And when you look at the different ordinances adopted by California jurisdictions, they've generally incorporated both LEED and Green Point standards. Some have opted for LEED for both, and there's great opportunity to structure it to what would best suit our jurisdiction. The standards where the rating system kicks in can vary from a small size building, say in Hayward or in Calabasas, where it was a 500 square foot building. In many jurisdictions it's much larger, say 50,000 square feet for Pasadena. And Napa, which we have been looking at and following what they've been doing, in December of this last year adopted a 35,000 square foot standard for commercial structures. Those may be too large a standard, obviously, for our town. We also don't have many developable parcels left, which will affect that. So we need to come to terms with what type of trigger mechanism we're looking at. Same would apply to residential. We don't have many new single-family potential residences other than this large Vineyard Oaks project, and they're voluntarily seeking to comply with this standard, but that's something to discuss. Perhaps our greatest potential in town is with remodels and significant ones where we see a tear down and a rebuild. I would say we may want to apply the standard there, but when it's less, when do we want to have that trigger set in if we're doing a rating system? Other options for a green code, which can be in addition to or in lieu of the rating systems, are prescriptive measures that prescribe certain green building measures, and they can be energy-saving appliances or water-saving fixtures or requiring newer and improved insulation, things of that nature. This is different than the rating systems where it gives a developer an opportunity to pick and choose what they want. This would be prescribed to them. One other element we want to look at is how do we enforce this, and how early do we want to become involved in the process. What Napa did was they started with the design stage, and it's really important to have full consideration given at that time. That's what the Vineyard Oaks project is doing. If it's not designed from the start, it's often really hard to meet those at the building stage, but you want to track and follow a project through building and occupancy to ensure that those have been met. One last thing I wanted to discuss are potential incentives that we could develop, offer developers so that it's a carrot to do this type of development, giving them rebates or reimbursements, reducing permitting fees or streamlining our processes, or even reducing land use exceptions. The FAR densities that we're discussing on the Vineyard Oaks might be something that we're so appreciative of these that we are willing to see a higher density or a floor area ratio. So those are some of the issues, and I wanted to introduce it to you and get your thoughts and ideas on that.
I'm very happy to see us move in this direction, and I support the idea of expediting by way of incentives for builders, and even in the permitting process, for example, for someone who was going to take down a house completely and rebuild, if there's some way that they can, receive incentives. I'm glad to see us moving in this direction, that's for sure.
I too am really happy to see us moving in this direction. I think in 10 years, everyone's going to be doing this because it's just a good thing to do. It's a good practice. It's become more affordable or justifiable to do these things, and it's very good. I think that we do need to have different standards for residential than commercial and such. And I think LEED is a good system, and this is just a guess, but I think in order for it to make, for it to work at the staff level, we need to look at a third-party certifying or, review type situation. Is there such a thing for LEED, Bob? Is there, are there third parties out there? Yes. Okay. So I think that's a good option. I think in your staff report, I'm sitting here trying to read it on my phone. There was mention of thanks. Like a percent-based standard. So if you're not so much square footage, but if you have a 1,200 square foot home, and you're remodeling, say, 20% of it, it might trigger a green standards or something. I think the percent-based standard might be a good idea. I think that the one problem with adopting a system is that a lot of opportunities might fall through the cracks. And so I'm thinking if you have whether it's a percentage-based standard or a square footage-based standard, there are certain things like green building materials or waste, recycling or landfill diversion type things that you can have built into your green building code that is separate from the actual system triggers, whether it's LEED or the green points or whatever it's called. So I think that green measures can be worked into the code at all levels. So if it falls below a trigger for LEED, say, maybe there are some performance criteria that even a small project can fall into, whether it's a garage remodel or that sort of thing. And then lastly, I think at least for commercial work, that it would be an advantage to the town to look into teaming with the county's green business certification program. And this kind of falls out of building codes, but they have a nice system in place for certifying green businesses. I've done 2 of them already, or so far, and I just think there's an opportunity there, and they have the green winery certification out too, so that might be worth at least investigating as part of the process. So.
Here, here. And there's a good deal more about this that I don't know than I do know. So I'm wondering, could you have a list of priorities, for example, for home remodel, since we are built out, where double windows could be met with some incentives? Several years ago, the town gave incentive for low flush toilets and also for appliances. Could you do that with water heaters? Are you using those tankless water heaters in the night project?
Yes, and I could actually fill in a lot of the blanks. Can the public speak or not?
Please.
Yes.
Yes.
Perhaps, would you like to go first? No, ironic, this is on the agenda tonight, and I need to give you a perspective for a second. I've been a green builder since '83, and I became fashionable in '99. But between '83 and '99, I was weird, or at least people viewed me as weird. So I have that perspective. The second perspective I have is I am part of a board member of Sustainable Napa County, which is now working with all the cities in one form or another. As a matter of fact, we put on a forum 2 years ago in Yountville, right over here, that all of the council members and mayors and planning commissioners and so on from the 5 cities came to. So I have the valley perspective. The third perspective I have is I'm a board member of the United States Green Building Council, Redwood Empire chapter, which goes from the Golden Gate to the Oregon border. So as I do my job there, I'm watching what all the other communities are doing. So I want to give you that perspective. All of the 5 valley cities each have different challenges. Napa is undergoing a big commercial growth spurt, and we just moved forward with the first part of their green building ordinance, which is a multiple layer. The part that was just approved was all commercial over 30,000. We are now working on all commercial under 30,000, and then we're working on all residential new, and then we're working on all residential remodel. So Napa will have essentially an across-the-board policy in place. Tonight at Santa Rosa, Napa, up until tonight, had one of the toughest jurisdictions in the valley, in the North Bay, perhaps in the whole Bay and all the counties. But Santa Rosa tonight is going to leapfrog us. They're putting in an even tougher ordinance. So if you look at the 5 cities, American Canyon is moving very slow on this. Napa is moving very fast. The county's moving relatively good. They've got it in their green policy. I'm pleased to see it's in Yountville now. We're working with St. Helena. And St. Helena, it's similar to Yountville in terms that they're mostly built out, and most of the stuff is remodel and some commercial. And then Calistoga is also working on one. So we're doing a series of projects in the valley. So with that background, I, for example, am recommending to all the jurisdictions that the residential side of the green building ordinance be covered by Build It Green and not by LEED. LEED is extremely tough and a very high standard, and we're doing it on the Knight project because we really want the highest possible standard. But when it comes to, as this ordinance moves forward, and which, by the way, part of Sustainable Napa County's mission is to work with Sandra, Bob, Steve, to help them craft the ordinance. And we have it within our budget to give them consultation. So I want to offer that and let you know that. So we can help you draft the ordinance that works for Yountville with respect to remodels, additions, fireplaces, windows. You're absolutely correct. The most important thing here is something has to be done. It is no longer the cute thing to do. It's no longer the my son wants me to recycle, so I'm going to do that. It's the territorial imperative. I write for a column for a magazine, and the column I'm writing this week has something to do with what's called biotriage, because now part of science is coming forward to say we are going to lose species, and we have to determine which ones we're going to lose. So it is past that point. So every community, no matter how big, how small, has to address it. And the most important and fastest way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is through green building ordinances. It's the #1 way. It is not transportation. It is not manufacturing. It is not fuel. The greatest impact and fastest impact is green building ordinances, because the buildings consume the majority of energy. So, Madam Chairwoman, I like what you said at the end there about the Knight project. It's getting overlooked. I mean, this project, what you have in Bardessono is stellar. It's off the chart stellar, and we're trying to achieve the same thing with the Knight project on the residential side. So anyway, I just want to fill in those blanks, and we're a resource. Healthy Buildings is a resource. Sustainable Napa County is a resource. U.S. Green Building Council is a resource. I can bring Build It Green in here. Whoever you want, I can get them here to help you out. It's an important, and it won't cost you anything, too. It won't cost you anything either. So anyway, I just want to make those comments. All righty? Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's a good place to end it, on an up note. Thank you very much.
Was there something else that did you want to have some input?
I'm just here in support of this as well. It's final.
I think we all agree.
May I have a motion to adjourn?
I so move that we adjourn this wonderful meeting.
All in favor? Meeting is adjourned.